All right, thank you very much, Rabbi Krebs. First of all, it's a great honor to be able to address the community in Sydney on this amazing day today. I'm very connected to the community in Sydney. As the Rabbi mentioned, I'm married an Australian, and I've been to your beautiful part of the world many times. So it's a real honor and a privilege for me to be able to share my story with you today. I also just I want to thank Rabbi Krebs for giving me this opportunity. Gad as well is a great leader of the Jewish people. So thank you, Rabbi. Okay, my wife told me that I could touch up my appearance on Zoom, but I'm yet to find the button that can remove my gray hairs from my beard. So you're gonna have to bear with me a little bit for the next bit. But hopefully, I have a story to tell, which I'm going to take you guys on a journey. So sit back, relax, and hopefully we will all gain much from the next few minutes that we spend together. So I want to share with you the two reasons that I chose the name State of the Heart for the book, which I published. Let me first say that the book was published this year, March. It made it into all the major bookstores in Israel, only to be told the next day that actually all those bookstores were closed because of the coronavirus. So this has been an interesting journey for myself. So I had to move the operation online, and that's what I guess I'm doing right now with you. I'm sharing the story online, which I actually think is one of the best ways that, to share the story. So what are the two names that I chose? What are the two reasons that I chose the name State of the Heart for this book? I want to take you guys on a journey through the stories of some of the book that will answer the reasons that I chose the name for this book. But before I do that, I want to start off with my own story, because this is very much the reason and the motivation for me writing this book. So almost 20 years ago, I joined 6 Israeli students at the United Nations World Conference Against Racism. This was a conference that brought over 20,000 people from all over the world to Durban, South Africa, a part of the world that I'm from, to discuss important issues of racism that were taking place in the world. Now, we had heard that Israel was going to be one of the topics at the conference, but none of us could imagine what we were about to experience. The day of the conference, I waited in a long line to register for the conference. And when I got to the registration table, I was given this free t-shirt that you can see with the official logo of the United Nations on the shirt, with the logo of the conference. And it had a picture of a young boy by the name of Mohammed al-Dura, who was a young Palestinian boy that was allegedly killed by the Israeli army at the beginning of the Second Intifada. Now, he became the poster child for the Second Intifada. Some of you might remember the picture. But what was later proved in a number of international courts, the main one being in Paris in France, that there was absolutely no ways that the Israeli army had killed this boy, because if they did kill this child, it meant that from the position where the soldiers were standing, the bullet would have to have moved and bent around a building in order to hit his position. And this was proved a number of times after this. But there in Durban, it never mattered, because there were 20,000 people from all over the world wearing this shirt with a very clear and strong message that the state of Israel is a country that has no regard for humanity, and that we would intentionally kill young children. Now, the rest of the conference was very much followed the same kind of event. Now, we came back to our hotel room on the first night of the conference, and one of my friends, a guy by the name of Eyal, he said to us when we were there in the room, he said, we should design our own t-shirt. Now, we all looked at him and we said, Eyal, there were 20,000 people wearing the same shirt. How in the world would we be able to design a shirt and make a difference like this shirt that you see in front of us? So he said, let's just design it anyway. And actually what happened was, within a very short period of time, we raised a significant amount of money to produce and print 20,000 of our own t-shirts. And this is the shirt, this is the back of the shirt that we made that day. The front of the shirt had a peace sign with the Magen David, a blue Magen David on the front of the shirt. And on the back of the shirt, it had this quote, a very famous quote by the late Martin Luther King, that said that those that criticize Zionism are really criticizing the Jewish people. Now, the next morning, I was sent in a very large delivery truck to fetch the shirts. I still to this day cannot remember the reason why I was sent by myself to fetch the shirts, but I got in the back of one of these very large delivery trucks, and we drove to the factory where the shirts are waiting from us. We got there, I opened up the doors to the delivery truck, and we started to pile essentially what was 20,000 shirts in the back of this delivery truck. Now, while the van was making its way back to the conference, the driver, who was a local South African, had no idea who I was or what the purpose of these t-shirts were. He fails to mention to me that what is taking place on the outside of the truck, literally 10 meters away from the truck, on a service road making its way to the conference, is essentially the largest anti-Israel rally that has ever taken place since the establishment of Israel. There were over 350,000 people marching towards the opening, towards the conference, and they were carrying banners, very much the same banners that we had seen in the opening ceremony the day before. And there is the picture of Muhammad al-Dura you can see being carried. Now we got to the opening ceremony, we got to the gates of the conference. I opened the door, and there were the 6 Israeli students that were waiting for me. And we started to do as we planned. We started to hand out the t-shirts, free t-shirts to whoever wanted one. And while we were doing this, basically this march started to bend around the corner, not far from where we were standing. The woman that is running the march, she's carrying a megaphone, and she starts to announce to essentially 350,000 people. She obviously saw the blue Magen David, and she starts to announce that you have to stop those Israelis from handing out their t-shirts. Now, I would leave it to your imagination to what happened next, but I'm not going to do that. Basically, what happened was people started to run towards us. We still had no idea why they were doing that, because we never heard the announcement. And only when they got very close to us did we realize that they were there for us, and they started to physically assault us until basically the South African police formed a circle around us and escorted us inside the conference. Now, the next day after this event, Mary Robinson, who happened to be the deputy head of the United Nations, called us 6 students, which you can see here in the picture, and she called us on stage and she made an apology on behalf of the United Nations towards us. And while she was doing that, I realized something very, very important, which has taken me a long, long time to formulate and to put down on paper into the book, which I'm going to speak to you about today. But I realized that basically the story of Israel has not been told. Shortly after this event, I came to Israel, I came back, I served in the Israeli army. And when I finished the army, I established an organization that basically tells the stories of non-profit organizations in Israel using fashionable t-shirts. And you can see some of the shirts that we've designed over the years in front of you. Now, after doing this for almost 10 years, I came to the conclusion 2 years ago that I had met so many incredible people. I'd met so many founders of Israeli organizations and charities that are doing work in Israel and helping people around the world, that I decided that the time had come to write a book. And I forced myself to do this. I'm not a writer by profession, but I locked myself in a room, and I wrote the following book, which you see in front of you. And the first reason that I chose the name State of the Heart for this book is the fact that there's probably no other country that places the priority of the sanctity and the preservation and advancement of human life than the state of Israel. Today, we have over 32,000 charitable organizations in Israel. This is more than any other country per capita in the world. Israel, since 1958, since Golda Meir was the Prime Minister of Israel, we have always been amongst the first nations to offer international aid to any country during their time of need. Today, we have over 7,500 startup companies, of which the majority of those companies are founding technologies and innovations that are making this world a better place. We have an army that invests billions of dollars to make sure that that civilians on both sides of the conflict and within all the conflicts that we are involved in are protected and that their lives are preserved. And finally, I can't remember the last point, but what I want to do now with you is I want to take you and share a number of those. I want to share a number of those stories with you that are inside the book. These are stories that I've personally encountered myself, that I've met the founders, and I want to start off by sharing some of these stories with you. The first story took place 2 years ago. I was working with Hadassah Hospital, which is one of the largest hospitals in Jerusalem and in the state of Israel. And some of you might know that in 2016, the news broke that Israel and Israeli doctors had been treating Syrian civilians that had been wounded in the ongoing civil war just over our northern border in Syria. Now, when the story broke in the news in 2016, the doctors at Hadassah Hospital and doctors throughout Israel weren't surprised at all, because they were the only ones that knew that since the outbreak of the war in 2011, Israel had been treating thousands of wounded Syrian civilians since the outbreak of the civil war. And what happened in Hadassah in June 2018 was that this young girl that you see in this picture, she was brought to Israel with her companion, which is the woman wearing the head covering. And she came to the northern border. The Israeli doctors did the triage, where they basically assessed what the problem of this young girl, who was clearly very sick. And they determined that if this young girl did not enter into open heart surgery within the next 24 hours, she would basically pass away. And they called up Dr. Julius Gollander, who's the head of the pediatric heart surgery department at Hadassah. And he personally drove to the border, to the northern border, and he assessed the child. He gave a second assessment of the child, and they decided that the child needed to be brought to Hadassah Hospital, as that's one of the best heart departments in the country. And they brought the child and their mother in an army van back to Jerusalem. And when they brought the child into the pre-op, they invited an Arabic-speaking social worker to speak and to explain to this woman the procedures that her daughter would have to go through in order to save her life. And what this young woman revealed to the social worker shocked all the doctors and medical staff that were standing around. She told them that she was not the mother of the child. Now, the reason that this news was shocking is that the only way for this surgery to be given consent to the surgery was to be given the parental concession of one of the direct parents of this child. Now, the problem was that this child's parents had basically split up in Syria as a result of the war. The father had been missing for a number of years and had not been seen by his family. And the mother was too afraid to come to Israel, because you could imagine someone that is brought up in Syria, they've heard so many things about this country that she thought her life would be in danger by coming here. So the only person that was prepared to bring this child into Israel was this young woman who was the aunt of the child, who had basically semi-adopted the child and brought her to the state of Israel. Now, the doctors had a predicament. The child needed to be operated on. There was 24 hours left, and yet their hands were tied. There was nothing legally that they could do. Eventually, Dr. Gollander was so frustrated that he called the soldiers back on the northern border, and in typical Israeli chutzpah style, he said to them, "You guys have put us in this mess. You guys better get us out of this mess." And what happened next, according to Dr. Gollander, and it's a story directly from his mouth and has been verified by the hospital, was that the Israeli army organized a secret mission into Syria that night. They tracked and located the child's father. They brought him to the northern border that evening. He was explained the procedures that his daughter, who he had never seen or met, would have to go through. He signed the consent forms, and the baby and child's life was saved that day in the state of Israel. The second story that I want to share with you is the story of this woman featured in this picture. This is Gal Lusky. The first time that I met Gal was in a very crowded cafe in Tel Aviv. I remember sitting there, listening to the stories that she told me, and almost feeling to myself that I didn't believe what she was telling me. Gal is the founder of an Israeli organization called Israeli Flying Aid. I mentioned to you in the introduction that Israel is always amongst the first countries to offer international aid to any other country in their time of need. Yet this organization does something quite unique. They specialize in providing aid to countries that no other country provides aid towards. These are usually very fundamentalist countries that have no diplomatic relations with the Western world. And GAL's organization, made up of over 2,000 volunteers, made up of doctors, of search and rescue professionals, of soldiers from very specialized units, they will ship and go to any part of the world, placing their own lives in danger in order to bring aid to people that have not been attended to by the international community. And I want to share with you guys a short video that ironically was taken by Al Jazeera. You can imagine that Al Jazeera is a news station that is not very fond of this country, and yet they were the ones that picked up on the story. There was a very large hurricane in Myanmar, in Burma, in 2006, in which thousands of people were killed and many people displaced. And this video features Gal and her organization as they go and provide aid to the people in Burma.
Well, before Myanmar's military agreed to allow foreign aid into the country, some help was already getting through. Aid agencies have been operating secretly in the Irrawaddy Delta, taking vital supplies to villagers who have not received any relief. Al Jazeera's correspondents in the country followed the journey of one humanitarian group as it went into the Delta.
Before Myanmar security deploys in the city streets, a covert aid operation is launched. Israeli flying aid specialized in emergency response. It's taken a lot of convincing to get the driver of this lorry to help them. He could be sent to prison for taking foreigners into the disaster area. Once inside, they stack sacks of rice to make a wall and hide behind it. They are one of only a handful of humanitarian groups operating secretly in Myanmar. It's an anxious and uncomfortable 8-hour drive into the Irrawaddy Delta.
It is worth the risk. Someone needs to feed these people.
Someone looks out for army checkpoints, and when stopped, they quickly fall.
Well, before Myanmar's military agreed to
Okay, sorry, 1 second. Okay, we're going to move on. I apologize, I stopped the video a little bit short, but I'm not going to risk it by going back. The following story is one of my favorite stories in the book. In 2010, there was a very large earthquake in Haiti. Some of you might remember there were over 100,000 people that were killed during this earthquake, and over 1 million people lost their homes. And one of the stories that broke in the news was that the first country to arrive on the scene in Haiti was actually the state of Israel. And people asked, how could it be that we got there before the United States, that we're right next door Haiti? But that's what happened. In fact, many of the organizations that I've personally worked with were some of the first organizations to arrive in Haiti and offer help. And the following story, which you can see in front of you, and this is a picture that is taken just after the story took place, was that on the Saturday, the first Saturday directly after the earthquake hit, a university building collapsed in the capital city of Haiti, in Port-au-Prince. And this building trapped 23 university students underneath the rubble of the building. Now, international aid rescue teams had arrived on scene and had tried desperately overnight on Friday night to free and to rescue the students that were underneath the building. Eventually, another rescue team arrived on the scene. This is an organization called Zaka. They are an ultra-Orthodox Jewish organization from Israel. They're made up of some of the best search and rescue workers in the world today. And these guys had just arrived from Mexico on a helicopter as a result, because there was a plane crash in Mexico the day before the earthquake in Haiti. And they went to help there in that part of the world. And they were brought to Haiti directly after that, and they were directed directly to the scene of this collapsed building, this university building. And they worked for 6 hours, and within 6 hours, the rescue team had basically located the university students. And after a number of hours, they extracted all 23 of the students. Now, while they were working underneath the rubble, basically the entire village that surrounded this collapsed building had come to see what was happening. And they were all standing around this building. And this story was related to me by the head of Zaka. The villagers, the local Haitians, were standing and waiting in anticipation to see the outcome of this event. Now, some of you might know that Haitians are very superstitious, and they believe and they worship idols. And while they were waiting, they started to see incredible things. They started to see that this rescue team, one by one, had basically brought all 23 of the students. They had rescued them, and they came out of the building. Now, when the 6 Israelis came and emerged from the building, they turned towards each other, and this was on Saturday. This was during Shabbat, and these are ultra-Orthodox Jews that are obviously Shabbat observant. And they said to them, they said to themselves, they said, Chebra, they said, guys, we haven't prayed. We haven't prayed the morning prayers that we pray on Shabbat. And there on the rubble, they brought out their talitot, the talitot that they wear in shul, and they started to pray facing Jerusalem. They started to pray the Shacharit prayers of the morning. And you can imagine that the Haitians, who are superstitious, are staring there and watching these 6 men that are covered in white talitot, that are swaying back and forth. And according to the Haitians, they thought that they were angels, and they came up to them and they hugged them, they kissed them, and they praised them for saving their fellow countrymen. So those are 3 stories that basically, for me, sum up the first reason why I chose the name State of the Heart for the book. That we're a small country, we're a tiny country, one of the smallest in the world, and yet we have a very big heart, and our humanitarian outreach can be felt in almost every corner of the world. But the second reason that I chose the name State of the Heart for the book, and for me this name is almost a little bit more meaningful, is that I felt the more that I wrote the book, the more that I got into the stories of the book, the more that I felt that this was a book that is not only about Israel, but this is a book about people. This is a book that tells the motivations and the philosophies and ideas that drive and cause people to basically dedicate their lives to help other people around the world. And I want to share with you now, just very briefly, a few of the stories of some of these individuals that I believe are worth mentioning to you today on Yom Haatzmaut. And the first person is actually a very good friend of mine who has been quite a lot in the news lately. Those that know Eli Bir is the founder of United Hatzalah. It's one of the largest organizations in Israel today. Eli Bir, basically here he's pictured in this picture, which was taken a few days ago. He was diagnosed with corona in Miami. He was induced twice into a forced coma, and then he was fighting for his life, and thank God he was brought to Israel in the last few days. Now, Eli's story starts when he was 16 years old. When he was 16, he volunteered for an ambulance service in Israel, and he became incredibly frustrated by the fact that every time he arrived on the scene of an emergency, the person had basically passed away. He felt a much better way of doing things, and basically Eli founded United Hatzalah using motorcycles and volunteers with a very special technological application called NowForce, that basically every time there's an emergency situation in Israel, the technology dispatches the closest volunteer, and they have over 50,000 volunteers in Israel today. They dispatch the volunteers to the closest person, that guaranteeing that basically within 3 minutes, and most of the time it's within 90 seconds, every single emergency call within Israel has been responded to. Here is Eli, basically a week before he was diagnosed with corona. I gave him a book, and he sent me a beautiful video, and we've been praying that Eli gets better. But I think that Eli is one of the most inspiring people that I've ever met. Today, United Hatzalah basically responds to over 300,000 calls every single year, of which about 20% of those calls are life and death situations. So if you do the maths, you can imagine how many people Eli Bir has saved in his life. And today, Eli serves as a consultant, going all over the world, sharing his technology and sharing the know-how that his organization has to save many more people's lives around the world. The second person that I want to mention is a person that I've worked quite closely. This is Sivan Yaari Borovich. Sivan worked for a very large international company in the mid-1990s in Africa. And every day while she drove to work, she saw and personally witnessed the incredible poverty that exists on the African continent today. In Africa today, still today in 2020, over 70% of the people that live in Africa do not have access to electricity or to running water. And she came back to the state of Israel and she founded an organization called Innovation Africa. Using Israeli technology, they install solar panels and the technology that is used to monitor them within African villages around the continent. These are, once every single installation is being put in a village in Africa, they are controlled and managed from the state of Israel, from her offices in Herzliya. And she has provided running water and electricity today to over 1 million people. And every year the numbers grow. And this is a person that has really, really made a difference for global humanity. And she's recently been recognized by the United Nations for the work that she does. The third person that I want to mention, again, is a person that I had the privilege of meeting just before the coronavirus broke out. And this is Major Reserves Doron Almog. Doron Almog is probably one of the most decorated soldiers in the state of Israel today. He's most famously known that he was the second in command during the Entebbe raid. He fought alongside Yoni Netanyahu, the late brother of the current Prime Minister of Israel, who fell during that operation. And Doron was the first soldier that basically hit the tarmac during the Entebbe operation. He later went on to lead many, many missions, both those that are known and unknown for the state of Israel. And he eventually became the commander of the southern region in Israel and oversaw a number of the major operations that Israel underwent. But Major Almog is known for something, in my opinion, even greater than that. His late son, Eran, was born with a very, very severe cognitive disability. And Doron, as a result of that, went on to found an organization called Aleh Negev. Today, they operate 6 centers throughout the country, offering some of the most advanced care techniques for disabled and special needs children. These are children from all sectors of Israeli society, regardless of the background, the religion, or the belief of these children. And this organization today has made a very huge impact for hundreds of people's lives. And there you can see a picture that Doron sent me the other day. This is Doron holding the book. The picture in the background is Doron riding a horse. This was a picture that was commissioned for him. It's Doron riding a horse with 2 people behind him. The person in the middle is his late brother, Eran. Eran was killed during the Yom Kippur War. He was killed in a tank battle, a very, very tragic story, which I'm not going to share with you today. And his late son, Eran, was named after his late brother. And there they are riding a horse, because one of Doron's greatest dreams in life was to ride horses with his brother when they were kids. And he always dreamed of doing that with his son, which he never got the opportunity, unfortunately, to do. The final story which I want to share with you, which has been taken off my presentation. I'm just going to share the story with you without the image. So in Australia, it's Yom Haatzmaut. We are still in Yom HaZikaron, the day to remember the fallen Israeli soldiers and victims of terror. And I wanted to share with you a story of a very good friend of mine who was killed a number of years ago, Eyal Banin. Eyal was, for those of you that remember the Second Lebanon War, the event that that triggered the outbreak of the war was a cross-border ambush in which Hezbollah terrorists killed 3 Israeli soldiers and abducted 2 of them. The 2 soldiers, Eldad Regev and Ehud Goldwasser, they were abducted and eventually freed. Their bodies were returned to Israel after Israel negotiated for their release. And the 3rd soldier that was killed was a very good friend of mine, Eyal Banin, Zichrono Livracha, that I served in the Israeli army with. Eyal, the reason that I'm mentioning the story is not only to remember Eyal, but Eyal was the medic of the unit that I served in. And he was a person that showed incredible care and compassion to whoever we came across. We were once involved in a terrorist attack. And in fact, the terrorist himself was injured in the attack. And I'll never forget the scene of watching Eyal treat and bring back to life a terrorist that are just trying to kill us. And again, this is a story that is often not told about the state of Israel. Is sometimes things that don't make a lot of sense, but this is very much part of the story. And the final point that I want to just speak about now, and this for me is kind of the elephant in the room. We are all in lockdown at the moment, a very strange global situation that we're not allowed to leave our homes. And this is a situation that we're all experiencing and we're feeling together. And I think for myself, there's no better time to tell the story of the book than now. The reason being is that there's probably no better time to see the humanitarian side of Israel than what we've witnessed in the last few weeks in Israel. Soldiers, today, elite soldiers from elite units that would usually be used to defend our borders against enemies and to fight wars in Israel, have been packaging food packages, have been personally delivering these food packages to people in need in cities throughout the country, visiting the elderly. This has been their national responsibility and task. And we in Israel have been watching day after day the events of these soldiers doing this. Not only that, today, okay, I'll share this video, I'll share this story here. This is an El Al pilot. Israel made a very strong point of making sure that every Israeli citizen would be brought back to Israel. Some of these operations, in order to bring back Israeli citizens wherever they were, whether it was on their after army programs in South America, became a national priority. And I want to share with you this video that was taken by one of the pilots of the El Al plane that brought back students from Peru. It was one of the longest flights and rescue missions that Israel has ever undertaken for Israeli pilots. And this is one of them straight after that flight took place.
Share my feelings with you. It was the longest flight I ever had, 43 hours without leaving the plane. And I don't think any country would do such a rescue mission to bring back its citizens. It's very, very overwhelming, whole situation. And I'm so glad to be part of this company, part of this country, part of the Jewish people. And Am Yisrael Chai is not only a slogan, it's reality.
At the same time today, as I mentioned earlier, there are over 100 startup companies in Israel, technological companies, that are currently working to not only find a cure to this virus, but they're working to better the situation for people across every age group and sector of society. One of the most exciting companies that we're all holding thumbs for in Israel is a company called Migal, which is the research institute in the Galilee. And they're currently doing human testing on a vaccine that has shown very positive results so far. And please God, whether in Israel or anywhere around the world, someone will find a virus to that. And we've seen, again, volunteers, citizens of the state of Israel. The entire country has almost been mobilized to make sure that that people's lives are protected, and that life and the advancement of life is preserved and advanced in this country. And like I said, there's probably no better time for me to launch and to publicize and share the story of the State of the Heart book at a time like this in Israel. So that's me, that's my story in a nutshell. I try to keep it as brief and concise as I can. I would be more than happy to open up to questions. If anyone has a question to ask, I would be more than happy to answer anyone's questions.
Thank you, Dave. I think if I unmute everyone, it's going to become a bit of a balagan. So just if anyone at the bottom of your screen, you have a chat option there. So if you want to put in any questions there, please put in the question over there for David to answer. Dave, maybe just by way of getting us kicked off, I've often wondered about, when we talk about the amazing humanitarian efforts that Israel puts in. Firstly, why is Israel so bad in its own PR? I mean, is a country which, does so much, and yet all we hear in the news is about the bad. So why is Israel so behind the 8 ball in its own promotion?
Rabbi, that's a great question. And I think there's quite a long answer to the question, so I'll try and keep it as short as I can. One of the reasons that I believe personally that this is the more technical reason. The late Prime Minister of Israel, Yitzhak Rabin, had a policy during his lifetime. This was the beginning of the Oslo Accords, that Israel's policies would become our PR. In other words, there's no reason. He had a philosophy that there was no real reason to explain our policies. He would just allow our policies to speak for themselves. And I think that was a very large mistake, very big mistake that the state of Israel made almost 20, 30 years ago, that I think we're still suffering from today. I think things have definitely got a lot better. I think the state of Israel today is getting a lot better. And if you follow at least the government, if you follow the media and the content that they're putting out, things are getting a lot better. But I think there's another reason, and this is something very unique to the people of Israel. A lot of you have been to Israel, you understand, you've met Israelis, you understand the mentality. Israel is a very tachlis. We're a very practical orientated people. I think Israel for many years was also very insular. So Israel was very, the Israeli attitude is, we're not going to speak about what we do. That's not important for us. We're less concerned about, people hearing about what we do. We're much more concerned about actually just doing it and doing the job. Now, for those of us that have been brought up and live in the diaspora, so it's an unacceptable point, because you are the ones that have to live with the consequences of this mentality. I personally believe that there needs to be a balance. There needs to be the side of Israel that we get on with the job and we get things done. But I think there's also a great necessity that actually, I think is connected to the security of Israel, is making people understand around the world who we are and what we stand for.
Someone's asked if where can you buy the book online?
All right, thank you. So now I'm moving on to the commercial side. So yes, you can buy the book online. Currently, if you Google State of the Heart, it's published by Urim Publications. So if you Google State of the Heart, Urim Publications, that's URIM, you can purchase the book from them and they will ship it to you wherever you are in Australia.
Okay, so just one more question that I was sent to me instead of being sent to you is that, let me just try, it's a bit wordy here, let me just try to reword it. Israel's humanitarian efforts, I think it plays off a lot of what you've just said, but is the goal of Israel's humanitarian efforts there to try to win friends, or is it an end in of itself? Does that make sense? I think that's what the person's trying to ask.
Okay, it's a great question. I think the answer to the question is that when we speak about international aid that Israel gives, it comes from two places. International aid is given by the Israeli government. A lot of the times this is directed through the Israeli army. In other words, they're the ones that will fly to those countries around the world and deliver the aid. And at the same time, aid is given and delivered by many privatized non-profit organizations. I think there's a number of reasons that the Israeli government do offer their hand to countries around the world. You can research this online. The first Prime Minister of Israel to make this an official part of government policy was Golda Meir. She did this in 1958, and she made it. She spoke about the fact that international aid was actually one of the founding principles of the Zionistic movement. When Herzl spoke about what the vision and what the dream and the goal of modern Zionism was, one of the things that he spoke about was the fact that Israel would become a beacon of light to the nations around the world, and that we would deliver the know-how and the technological know-how and the advancements that we ourselves develop. We would become a source to deliver that to other countries around the world. So I think the first answer is that it is a means of itself. It's one of the values, and it's one of the parts, the fundamental principles of the state of Israel today. I think there's always, we can't be too naive. There's definitely a very strategic motivation and reason for Israel extending its hand. And one of the greatest places to see this today is, in fact, in Syria. When the Syrian government basically started to attack its own people, causing the start of a civil war in its own country, in which millions of people were killed. Israel saw this as an incredible opportunity to reach out to the Syrian people. The Syrian government itself still considers us their greatest enemy. And if you hear all the speeches that Bashar al-Assad speaks about, he's still to this day, after everything they've been through, after ISIS and after the Iranians and the Russians and everything that's gone through, he still gets up in public and he tells these people that we still have one enemy, and that's the state of Israel. But the Israeli government saw this as an incredible opportunity to extend its hand to the Syrian people. And I think that was one of the reasons why they did that, to try and create a grassroots movement where there could be dialogue and there could be strategic relations between Israel and these vulnerable populations around the world. Lastly, regarding the non-profit organizations that give the aid. So again, you've heard some of their stories. These are people that I've met with personally, and I can personally testify to you that the primary motivation and the reason why these people have dedicated their lives, a lot of them earn very minimal salaries, and are not, in many cases, they're not living in good conditions at all themselves personally, but they've dedicated their life to making sure and helping, fulfilling a Jewish thing, fulfilling values that often, when you hear them speak, are rooted in Jewish values, to be an or legoyim and to provide help wherever it's needed.
All right, two more questions. One, firstly, I did a quick search on Amazon. So you can see the book's available on Amazon and Book Depository. I don't think it's in Kindle or audiobook just yet. But a couple of questions, Dave. Do you work with any pro-Israeli, Arab, or non-Jewish non-profit organizations? That's question one. And yeah. Now the question was, do you get how do you get the message out to the others who don't appreciate it? So you're preaching to the converted here. So how do we get the message out? Okay, so first of all, the first question. So today, Israeli Arabs, when you speak about Israeli Arab organizations, Israeli Arabs are citizens of the state of Israel. 20% of our population is made of them, and almost the majority of the organizations that I mention and speak about in the book have Israeli Arabs that are either paid employees or volunteers for them. In fact, the organization that you see in front of you, Magen David Adom, one of my favorite stories in the book is actually the story of an Israeli Arab Muslim ambulance driver. I'll share the story with you very briefly. He responded to a terrorist attack in Jerusalem a number of years ago, in which a terrorist had basically run over a number of people on a sidewalk, and he killed a young child, and the terrorist killed a young child. And this Israeli Arab ambulance driver arrived first on the scene, and he took this child's family. The mother was critically wounded, and he took both the mother and the child, and he rushed them off to Shaarei Tzedek Hospital, not far from where the attack took place. Unfortunately, the child passed away soon after the event, but the doctors at the hospital were able to save the woman's life, and she recovered fully from the incident. A year later, after this happened, she basically she went into labor. She fell pregnant a number of months after she fell pregnant soon after she recovered from the incident, and she went into labor in her apartment in Jerusalem. Her husband realized there was not enough time to order to take her to the hospital. So once again, he called
Magen David Adom, he called the ambulance service to arrive. And the ambulance driver, who happened to be the same Israeli Arab driver that had saved her life the year before, was again the first one to respond to the call. And he rushed into the apartment and he delivered the child inside this woman's apartment. And soon after the delivery, he looked at the husband and the husband looked at him and they connected. And they both worked out almost simultaneously that this was the same family that they had contact with the year before. So the book is full of stories, again, like I mentioned, across all sectors of Israeli society. And this is something that I could speak about, I think, a little bit more in depth. To answer the second question, what am I doing to get the story out? So together with the book, I've launched an initiative to turn the stories of the book into little videos. We launched, in fact, just before Yom HaZikaron, we launched our first video. Currently, over 30,000 people from all over the world have seen this video. So this is an initiative that I'm hoping to build. If anyone wants to get involved, I'd be more than happy to speak to you, in which we're going to take the stories of the book, produce short 1.5-minute videos that tell the story, and we're going to share them with audiences throughout the world so that people beyond just the Jewish community can learn about the stories.
Sure. Well, thank you so much, David. I'm going to just ask you to stop sharing screen. I'm going to hand over to Rabbi Shua Solomon, who's just going to close up the evening for us today. Rabbi Solomon, you have been unmuted.
Thank you, David. You don't know me, but I actually listened to you for the first time 15 years ago when I was on a Year 10 program in Israel. And you obviously had the Sydney connection, so we came and I was really inspired then. And you've inspired me again as well as all the other people who are listening. So thank you so much. It's definitely what we need on Yom Haatzmaut. And we should carry that energy, positive energy, enthusiasm, and really ability and drive to make a difference for Israel and for people all over the world into not just Yom Haatzmaut, but the rest of the year. So thank you so much. Really appreciate you giving your time. Thanks to Rav Krebs for organizing. And thank you all for listening. Have a good night. Chag Haatzmaut Sameach. And please continue to enjoy.
Chag Sameach.
Right. Chag Sameach. Thank you, everybody.